Today, let's talk about leadership and neuroscience. How it could play out in a crisis situation like the one we are currently facing. It's quite exploratory, and I would love to hear your comments or feedback. Let's first look at neuroscience or the human brain. These are exciting times, with the kind of fMRI imaging that is currently available, we can actually see the brain in action. Earlier, the closest approximation we had to understanding the human brain was the field of psychology. That's what has defined leadership so far. So I do hope that neuroscience defines leadership as a domain from here on. Unlike other animals in the animal kingdom, humans are pretty unique. We are born with a brain which is not completely hardwired. In fact, it responds to the environment it is born into, and the brain generates its capabilities as we grow. Unlike babies born to other animals in the animal kingdom who start functioning right from the moment they're born. Now we come to understand that the brain is ever changing and it continues to change into old age. Earlier it was thought that it doesn't change much after reaching adulthood. There is a very fascinating documentary on Amazon Prime called The Ever-Changing Brain. So just imagine at the age of 2, a human baby has double the amount of synaptic connections, and double not by a small margin, by trillions. So what really happens between the age of 2 and by the time we reach adulthood? The concept of pruning comes into play. You're born with the circuit board, which has all the potential that a human being could have. And from that age onwards till you reach adulthood, the ones that you don't experience or you don't use get pruned away. It's almost as if the ones that you use get stronger and stronger, and these fade away into the background. But it's never too late to reactivate those. Science tells us that you can actually practice new experiences and regenerate some of that circuitry. So here is an interesting exercise that you could do during the lockdown. Do stuff that you have never attempted before. Practice writing using a non-dominant hand, or write upside down, because all of these will take a lot more focus and attention, and it will regenerate some of the neural circuitry which exists there but you don't use. Because the brain is also highly energy intensive organ, as an evolutionary mechanism, the human brain has learned how to use shortcuts. And that's true of thinking as well. Thinking is one of the most intense activities. So the human brain has learned how to use less energy by using less thinking. So the more experience you have of a particular industry and a particular kind of organization or a particular environment, the less thinking you deploy. Thinking moves into the background or is almost not used when you are in familiar situations. Is COVID a familiar situation? No, it is not. So hopefully we will use a lot more thinking during the time of the COVID crisis. Giving the brain new experiences actually makes it really, really healthy and makes it better. Leadership behavior is a function of the person and the situation. The concept of situational leadership. You put a person in a situation and the behaviors that they use is largely a function of the person in that particular situation. If you change the person, the behaviors that they would show would be very different. Or if you change the situation, the same person would show different behaviors. For our discussion, we'll keep the situation as constant, a crisis situation. Would different leaders make better impact compared to other leaders? Definitely yes. But we will also explore that could the same leader have a different impact? Which brings us to the third concept. Is the person always the same given the context or the situation? And there is a very interesting research or experiment in this space. So it is called the trolley dilemma.
A runaway train is heading towards 5 workers on a railway line. There's no way of warning them, but you're standing near a lever that operates some points. Switch the points, and the train goes down a spur. Trouble is, there's another worker on that bit of track too, but it's 1 fatality instead of 5. Should you do that? Many people think the right thing to do would be to switch the points, to sacrifice 1 to save 5, since that produces the best outcome possible. Now imagine the train heading for the workers again. This time it can only be stopped by pushing a very large man off a bridge. His great bulk would stop the train, but he'd die. Should you do that? Most people say no. But why not?
When you think of the sensation of, reaching out, touching somebody and pushing them, it actually engages or activates the emotional part of the brain. And when the emotional part of the brain is activated, compared to the logical part of the brain, which in situation A was activated, you actually tend to take very different decisions. You choose actually not to push this person and let those 4 people die. This is quite fascinating that the same person, given all their life experiences, by activating different parts of the brain can actually take very different decisions. This has significant implication for the current crisis situation. So we are all in a lockdown. That's true for the leaders as well. People are not attending office, they're working virtually. What if that gives rise to different decisions because more and more part of the thinking is happening in the logical processing part of the brain. I have been seeing visuals of 15, 20 people on Zoom and video conference calls, which gives an idea that it's a large team, but it takes away the entire contact part of the equation, which typically activates the emotional part of the brain. Fundamental truth about any business plan or any strategy is the underlying assumptions. And who makes those assumptions? People like you and me, leaders who are taking those decisions. So now in the crisis, when everybody is in a lockdown, leaders are likely to be scanning through rows and rows of spreadsheet data without looking at the lives of the humans behind it, who are going to get impacted by those decisions. If you are in a high stress situation and your leader doesn't realize what's going on in your life and you are most likely just another headcount for them, the kind of decisions that will get taken about you are most likely going to be inappropriate or may not even be fair. What is it that we could do differently to give an equal chance for the decisions to have a bit of emotional EQ in it? So if we were to activate the emotional part of the brain, maybe it's a good idea for the leaders to get a glimpse into the lives of the people that they lead. Through these video conferences, through these Zoom calls, we all remember that famous clip.
For the wider region, I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region, do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. My apologies.
And we all found it to be very entertaining. We didn't find it as a disturbance because we thought that it was pretty cute. Here is the chance for leaders and every single person that they lead is operating from their home environment to actually get a glimpse into the lives of the people that they lead. That perspective could bring about a different kind of decision making. Maybe that perspective will activate the emotions processing part of the brain, and the same leaders could actually take a far more balanced call. But that would be an interesting experiment to run. This particular facet of how neuroscience impacts who we are, how what part of the brain we activate impacts the kind of decisions that we take, and the time of crisis, the opportunities that we have, was a very interesting combination. And I thought that I'll start off my first video with talking about this topic, and maybe we'll continue exploring the implications of neuroscience in different aspects. And I hope you find reason to try some of those experiments or react to it or send me suggestions. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for listening.